what we're going to talk about in this conversation is how to anchor and nourish a vision. And I know Tom is very keen to describe really what he means by anchoring and I guess nourishing as well, a vision. So Tom, for people who don't know you, do you want to do a little bit of background about your kind of arrival in this moment really, and sort of how you've enjoyed quite an interesting journey, very different to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I'm based in the UK. I've had very much an eclectic journey, both on a spiritual side, but also on a work side. I think that, my early jobs were in things like community development. One of my first really interesting jobs was a project manager of a community garden up in Norwich. Then I was involved with green politics. I was a local councillor in the UK. And yeah, but I had a real yearning to explore different spiritual traditions. I never felt really sort of that I was completely, how to put it, comfortable or embraced just in one. I was very much someone who was within a tradition for a while, but then would have doubts and move to another one and learn and kind of grow and sort of and develop. So I learned a lot over that time, and I always had an ambition that at some point in my life it would sort of come into a focus in which, I don't know, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a fully conscious thing, what I would do with all of this spiritual knowledge from Buddhism or the yogic tradition or Western esotericism, shamanism, sort of Christian mysticism. I mean, I've explored a lot of different traditions over the years, but I kind of, looking back, I had a sense it was going to emerge into something. I mean, I even used to, even with my friends, sometimes they would tease me. Sometimes I would just be, like cycling or just walking, and I would be sort of preparing talks or about these particular themes, as if, say, like now, like almost 15, 20 years later, I'm in a position where that's very much what I do. I can either go online, and I do a lot of online courses or in-person events. So I always felt I was kind of being prepared for that's how I like to think about it. I was kind of preparing myself to sort of manifest these things in my life. I mean, one thing that I always like to touch upon, and it was important for me, that most of the work that I do within the well-being sector, meditation, yoga, or the courses we do, I always try and bring in a sense of a respect both for the natural world, like a sense of being grounded in the natural world and a care for nature, but also some kind of connection to spirit, some kind of connection to the transcendence has always been an important thing. But sometimes, because I've done so many things and have not necessarily just focused on one thing, the main theme of today's podcast, just how to actually anchor a vision sort of in our hearts in a way, and nourish a new project or a new venture, is something that's quite pertinent for me, because in terms of my own psychology, and even according to one of my friends, my astrology, it's very easy for me to be sort of be drawn into different directions, and not necessarily so natural really to feel sort of that you're really anchored within a sort of a vision or an idea or something that you want to manifest.
So if somebody was listening to this, I mean, I'm curious about these, as you describe them, various traditions and approaches and kind of ways of thinking about the world and energies and consciousness. These are, quite a range of experiences that you've had on your journey. Do you feel that these have been almost subconsciously driven by you, or do you think these have kind of found you in terms of, because when people sort of describe things as being a calling, it's almost like something else or somewhere else is calling them, and it's kind of driven externally. I mean, where do you feel that your kind of impetus for this broad range of experiences has come from? Is it an internal thing that you've shaped, or do you think this is something driven by a higher, wider or external power or influence?
This is quite a big theme that you're touching upon, Neil. And I was having somewhat of a similar conversation with my friends a couple of days ago. We were in Wales, and we were going to this ritual for the winter solstice, and we were reflecting upon some of these deep questions about the role of individual free will or destiny, or what is it that we're kind of moving with in our lives. And the analogy that kind of came to me at that point was, I somewhat feel that in my life it's as if imagine you're at an orchestra or something, and someone has written the score, as it were, for the music, for the orchestra to play. And I kind of feel like that in my life, that there is a score that's unfolding, but what I have volition over, what I have freedom over, is how I dance with that, how I move with that, like how I respond to that, how I respond to that flow of energy that wants to move through me. For me, that's the useful sort of um, balance between the ideas of destiny or predestination and free will. I think there's a way that we have both, but I also feel that I'm not fully in control of all of the things in my life. I always liked an Einstein quote in this regard. I'm going to try and remember it, or it might have been Schopenhauer who I think was quoting Einstein, or the other way around, something like that. Or Einstein quoting Schopenhauer, but it was something like, you can will what you want, but you cannot will what you will, as it were. In other words, there's something that's so deep in the level of the human will or our intuition that it's not really a conscious choice, as it were. It's something, for me, more that we just need to somehow align ourselves to, and it might be a little bit different than what we expect, if that makes sense. I mean, there is a sense of kind of knowingness, if we're really ourselves, knowingness if we're really manifesting what we feel is our authentic individuality or personality. But that's a sacred thing. It's not. It might be something that we kind of need to work for, or it might be something that takes you decades to even feel like you're really authentically in your power. It's quite a mysterious thing that we kind of need to somehow cultivate and just sort of awaken within ourselves somehow.
The school run beckons, the boss is on the phone, the to-do list is ever increasing, my social media timeline is looking like a chaotic car crash. This is kind of real life. And then how does that kind of sit for a lot of people when they're kind of literally chasing their tails? And at the same time, we're kind of talking here about this need for space and time to find out. I'm going to come back to your word there, alignment. I mean, that's hard, isn't it? In a current sort of lifestyle that most people have, which is, there's never enough hours in the day. You're just pulled from pillar to post. I mean, where do you begin with something like this? Because it sounds a great kind of alignment, great balance to be in, but beginning must be the hardest thing.
It is, but it's for me, because I have quite a creative nature, that when I can tap into that creativity or that creative flow, I feel like I can be enough of an artist in my life to somehow balance these things, in terms of to the extent that we get caught up in the busyness of life, or caught on what would be called like the hamster's treadmill, or whatever metaphor we want to use for it. If we can somehow keep that creative play alive within ourselves, in other words, if we can be more in the mode of creativity rather than just reactivity, then that's one of the differences for me. And it's really about it's really about doing what you need to do to keep that flame of creativity alive in your life. And that's going to be something that's going to be different for different people. And it's not necessarily going to be something that someone else is just going to be able to tell you. It's not something that I don't think it's really like, because it would be easy for me to say, well, of course, what it takes is a regular meditation practice, and that's going to bring you that focus. But it very much depends on your psychology. For some people, it might be creative writing. When I was a young man, I mean, I still do a lot of creative writing now, but it was very cathartic and moving for me. I would just get so absorbed in my creative writing that I would literally forget about even what the time was. Like, hours would pass, it would seem like nothing. I was so absorbed. So if you can find ways to have that sort of playful absorption, it could be gardening, it could be creative writing, poetry, art, music, playing an instrument can sometimes find that, somehow keeping that creative flow alive. And if you can do that, I think it helps massively in terms of your engagement with your working life, and so that you're not overly exhausted. Because I think that a lot of what happens, and I've had this at different chapters of my life, just completely exhausted with, if you're working full time and you don't have that much space, and you kind of, you feel like how you can have that work sort of life balance. But you might need to be quite stubborn almost in terms of keeping these things alive within you, in terms of whatever it is that keeps that creativity alive. I think that's the kind of the key. And also, I think paying attention to your stress levels, not sacrificing, especially for people like us who work more within the realm of well-being, not sacrificing our well-being for the sake of just that extra social media post or that extra YouTube video. I mean, because if we lose our well-being, then of course our business is going to have a detrimental impact upon our business as well. So I think that's important.
So do you feel that it is that sense of creativity then that comes first? Because, there are, well, many people, practitioners, who will say, oh, no, you've got to find your vision, do the mood board, create the mood board, have this great dream, and then go power ahead to try and find it. It's all about, positivity and motivation and rah, rah, rah. What we're saying here is actually something quite different, which it feels, the way that you're kind of describing it, Tom, is that it's much more about going inward into yourself, and it's almost a voyage of discovery, rather than sort of manifesting or attempting to manifest this kind of artificial thing that might exist in the future. It kind of almost sounds like you can have it in the moment that you decide you're going to begin to be creative. Have I got that right?
I think so. I think it needs to, I really feel like that. And it's nice that you're sort of, feeling into what I'm describing here. And I want to sort of make it clear. It's not like I have all of this stuff completely worked out and I have a 12-step program in terms of, how to develop.
He probably does, though, people. He probably does. And he'll tell us about that later. But anyway,
this kind of creative vision. But I think that the first thing is that creative energy, that creative flow within ourselves, and then comes the practical activities. Because even going into a room and doing, a vision board or a mood board or something like that, you might find that you might not be fully engaged, or you might not be fully ready to be in that environment. It might cause stress, or it might cause anxiety, because there just may be, what I feel, it's good to point out, there may be sort of emotional blockages. There may be emotional blockages that is useful for us to recognize and sort of and to feel into, and really say, if you were going to go to an event like that and you feel resistance, it would be a sense of feeling, well, what is it in me that's resistant? Why am I resistant to this? And it may be that because in your rational mind you're thinking about focusing on a project, and it might be you did something similar a couple of years ago that went completely pear-shaped, and you haven't resolved that emotional stuff to do with that project yet, and somehow you need to refine that. And I think one of the best ways to refine that is to try to awaken what you could call the kind of child of play, or your playful child within you, And that might mean going back to things you did as a child, or it might be loves that you've put to one side. I mean, that's been very important for me recently. I was started to write a play, or rewrite, I should say, a play about the great artist and poet William Blake. And I literally, I wrote this play about 16 years ago. And I was on my hard drive of various computers over the years, but I always kept it. And I just thought, I'm just going to give myself a bit of a break here, rather than just go on to a new course or a new project. I'm going to get that play. I'm going to print it off, and I'm going to have a look at that play, because it was very alive for me. My kind of love for the work of people like William Blake. And it might be that you need to kind of rekindle these old loves before you can move on to new things, if that makes sense.
So there's a sense of kind of really listening and giving yourself the space and time to really kind of listen, as you say, from way back, as well as maybe things that are kind of happening in and around your world at the moment. So rather than just racing and rushing and setting this kind of audacious goal to achieve, let's call it success, whatever that might look like, and sort of be defined by, in yourself personally. But what we're talking about here is actually just going inward, reflecting, a little bit of introspection, and just sitting with it. And then if you feel, then is it about then feeling the calling in whatever way that then comes out? So it could be, as you say, it could be art, it could be, music, it could be some form of spontaneous creativity, and it could come out in any form, and all of us have got something of a creative nature in us, even though people might be listening to this thinking, well, I'm not creative, but it's innate in all human beings. It's just different. We can't really define it as a single thing. Is it that we need to just literally sit and wait and let it arrive, or is there some level of kind of proactiveness that we have to be sort of almost sort of instigating it? I'm keen to sort of find where this starting point really can be.
Well, for me, I mean, that really is a mysterious sort of thing we're touching on here. It's a bit like the question of, well, how do you create space in your life? Do you know what I mean? I mean, how do you create this spaciousness in your life where these things can begin to sort of flow through to you in a natural way, rather than a sort of artificial, enforced way? I think that, I mean, one thing that's important for me recently, and it's really been revelationary, really, is I really realized on a personal level the extent to which my behavior was dictated, in my view, sort of in an unhealthy way, by trying to meet the expectations of others, in the sense of being approved by them, So I think that if we're doing any projects or anything really, and if we really analyze, if we're honest, it's because we want approval by certain people. It might be your partner or your friends or your parents. And if you're doing it just for the approval of others, rather than because that's deeply what your heart desires, it's somehow about how to come to the point where you're sort of more internally directed, rather than just externally pulled on the strings that most of your time you're not even conscious of. It's somehow finding a way to sort of to step into that. Because although I feel that we do live within a very sort of to some extent sort of still like individualistic culture, and I know there's a sort of movement away from that into more community living and connectedness and all of that, the ability to be a sort of free individual, I mean, that's a very mysterious thing. I mean, it's just something that I feel like as a 41-year-old, I'm finally starting to really step into. I think it's what Carl Jung talked about when he talked about the process of individuation. It's a mysterious thing. It doesn't mean just that you get what you want all the time and you just rock around the world, just being a kind of individual. Is this a mysterious thing that we're really touching upon here?
That was, I almost sensed a collective kind of emotion coming through from everybody listening to this, and I certainly felt it there where you described that, because it's like there was the moment of kind of realization of, this isn't about anybody else, this is just about me. It's my vision, it's my dream, it's my life, it's my thoughts, it's my feelings, it's my behaviors, it's my anchoring, it's my nourishing, it's my everything. And I think there's the thing, this real kind of sense of, you can own this. This is all about you. This isn't really, even if you got a very close, intimate relationship with another, this isn't even about them. It doesn't really even involve them. Okay, they might support it, they might be behind you, as you kind of describe this to others, but this is all very, very much about self, isn't it? This is where the power in this lies, isn't it? And I think if we can become, and I do share your kind of feeling about, you do reach a certain point in your life where you think, hold on a minute, everything else is everybody else's, and I know what's mine. And it's not things, it's not tangible things. It's just, you get that sense of, oh yeah, now it starts to make sense. And like you say, you don't figure it all out, because we're all learning every single day, and we're never going to figure it out. That's the beauty of it. But you do get those little moments where you think, okay, now. And I have actually used the word wise, because I think once you hit that point, and you can only know it when you know it, you can't kind of make this up. You could read it in a book, you could hear somebody say it, but until you feel it, you don't really know it. But when you do know that you felt it, it's, okay. So nobody else actually really matters in this thing. This is all about actually me owning it, really owning it. And that's really empowering, isn't it? Because you're in control then, you're in charge. Even though this might be driven by some externality, some other power or whatever, like we talked about earlier, but you're still in charge of how you interact and work with that. Because this is where all the kind of a whole energy flow thing comes in, isn't it? This is where, you have choices. This is where it gets really interesting for me. I think this is great.
Yeah, and for people that are familiar with attachment styles, a lot of people like me who are in spiritual circles are people that at some point have kind of tried to pave their life in order to be more sort of self-reliant in some way, and kind of not rely upon others. So it was almost a journey for me to work against that, to say, no, I want to be in a long-term relationship. I want to share my life with my beautiful partner, which we've been together for nearly over 5 years now. So it was a journey for me to step out of that, just being reliant upon myself more, if that makes sense. But then there's this further journey to actually sort of just to really come back to yourself again, and to really feel that for someone with my psychology, it's okay for me to have needs. It's okay for me to have boundaries. It's not, no one's going to completely flip out. I don't need to save or fix anyone else. I mean, I can offer things to people, but for me, and I think it's also what you were sort of moving towards, is that sense of just being really composed or sort of secure within yourself, and finding a way so that your sense of worth isn't only dependent upon your sort of success in the world, as it were. Somehow you feel that sense of sort of worthiness within you, and then everything becomes so much more relaxed and blissful, because your sense of validation and identity isn't only because of, say, in my case, the number of students that have bought my new course, or of course I want people to buy my work and I want the numbers to go up and that to have more engagement, but I'm identified with something else primarily, and it's not the same thing as just being successful, in the eyes of the world. Because I mean, touching upon who I was referencing a little bit before, William Blake, some of these figures, they were not successful in their own day. They weren't, there were artists that most people would never have heard of, that were a lot more famous than William Blake was in his day. But yet he was so dedicated to his art. He was so absorbed in his art. He would refer to himself as a mental prince, someone that, although he lived a life of poverty, seemed to be completely content, or at least in his older days he was like that. So that's kind of what people like that is what I would sort of aspire to be, because I think that for a lot of us these days, we get so identified with either our thinking, our thoughts, or our work, or our projects, to somehow have that ability to have that detachment, but we still care. It's not like we become completely cold robots. We still care hugely, but we're able to have that detachment to our work as well. I think that's a really amazing thing if we can find.
So we talked right at the outset of this about, well, just really use the phrase anchoring and nourishing a vision. So I guess if we've kind of identified that there is this kind of inner smile, this inner creativity, this kind of either self-generated because we're consciously doing it, or feeling called by some force or energy elsewhere into a particular direction. If by doing that we kind of identify, oh, now I've got this vision in my mind or in my head or in my heart to sort of see something in the future, but I can kind of live the journey every day. How do we kind of anchor that? Because obviously, as everyday life then comes in from left field or right field, as we start to feel pressures on, being a human being, and also a human doing, because there's lots of stuff to do at the same time. How do we kind of do this anchoring and nourishing? Because it feels like it's something that could get either very distracted away from, or it could be quite a challenge to kind of maintain when we get all these other external pressures coming in.
I think it's one thing that I do is often when I'm sort of starting to get into that process of kindling a project, that I'll get my crayons out, I'll get the big sheets of paper, I'll be doing drawings, I'll be doing really just playing with it imaginatively. It's very important, particularly people like me who are quite busy up in the head with thinking a lot of the time, that I don't immediately start just thinking about it in terms of, okay, it would be easy sometimes just to have the idea and then quickly into the manifestation, quickly into, well, how's this going to work? And so I definitely encourage people not to do that. Stay longer in the play, the creativity, because in order to have the long-term sustainability and momentum, you're going to have to stay emotionally engaged with your project. You don't get it just from having it up here in your thinking mind. Your thinking mind can make decisions about what's good or what's bad or what will work, what won't work, but that's not going to sustain you long term. You need to be able to hold the project really within your heart center, and an aspect of doing that is kind of protecting that. And I'm sure people, I am being kind of serious when I say this. I think it's not such a good idea to talk to other people about your vision too quickly. It's a little bit like what authors have when they're writing a book. When you start talking to others, although you might be excited about it, you're talking to others with the best will in the world. Well, often people, what they'll feel like their role is to do is to tell you if they think it's a good idea or not, if they think it's a good idea, or if it would work, or what the drawbacks might be, and that can sometimes very much sort of fracture the sacredness of maybe what's sort of developing within yourself. So I would say, for at least a month or a couple of months, just keep it to yourself. I mean, we live in a culture where it's crazy. It's like privacy has such a bad name, as it were. Everything is supposed to be public, everything, all experiences, no privacy. But actually, when you're developing a new project, I think it's incredibly skillful to keep things private. It's a little bit like if you went on your first date and you're trying to charm some person on your first date, someone that you're attracted to or something. It wouldn't be skillful for you just to kind of lay it all out, tell them everything about yourself. It's energetically much more healthy to keep a lot of it just within ourselves. We get, sometimes when we're excited, we're like, I'm going to tell my partner, my friends, I'm going to share, I'm so excited about thing. And you think, oh, this is going to be good. But what you end up is just a load of feedback that might make you feel prematurely that your idea or your project isn't so good. But it's not fully formed yet. So why you haven't even you haven't really really gone into it yet enough within yourself. At least don't talk to people about it until it's secure enough within yourself that you're not just going to be you know, you're not going to have the wind taken out of your sails just if they tell you if it's a good idea or bad idea. I think our partners sometimes can be probably the worst for that, in terms of, you know, well, you tried this before and it didn't work, or I just don't think that's a good idea, or, you know, it's like, it's in the early stages. I just don't think it's really helpful when we're trying to really, yeah, there needs to be that sort of process of, whatever you want to say, fermentation, or I think you need to know as well when you're ready to to for your project to go airborne. And we're in a, I know people, this is a bit of a cliche, but it's so true. We're in a culture of instant satisfaction. We expect things to happen so quickly. It's not easy for us to think in the long term, to really plan ahead. Everyone is trying to manifest things so quickly. It's really good to sort of, you know, really feel into this stuff in the long term, particularly if it's a work project that's going to take up a lot of your time. You know, really feeling into, well, how is this going to look in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And, you know, coming back to what I was saying at the beginning of this, this is not necessarily things that I've always done myself. I'm talking from experience. Sometimes I would try and manifest things too quickly and get excited without really thinking it through. There is a time to really think it through logically, but, you know, but think about, I think it's important for us to feel that we're able to think about things in the long term, because we live in a culture where almost every year we're expecting it just to be, you know, like doomsday, the end of the world, or something's going to happen. It's not. I think in the past it would have been easier for people to really visualize long-term projects, because they just felt more secure. I mean, a lot of this is just about feeling more secure within ourselves, and taking time over the development of these things.
Leading question: where does dreaming, or the way you would define dreaming, with and I'm sure you're going to explain to us the art of dreaming, because there is a skill and an art and a science behind dreaming. Where does that fit into this? Does it fit into this? Can it be used consciously, or even, you might describe it as subconsciously, to kind of nourish the vision, or does it have a part to play?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, a simple way of describing what happens within dreaming is, it can be like a helpful feedback system for what's happening on an emotional level. In the science, it's very clear that our dreams are very reflective of our emotional states. Not necessarily just factually what was happening in our lives at a certain time, but definitely emotionally. It's very clear in the science, there's a strong correlation between what was happening emotionally and then what gets played out in our dreams. Because as well, in the science, and it wasn't so long ago that, you know, there were certain, you know, even sleep scientists or people commenting that just felt that dreams were just random, you know, neurological firings in the brain. They had no purpose. They knew they were connected to REM sleep, but they were more like is the word epiphenomenon, like something like that's a little bit like the warmth of the light bulb. So it's just a byproduct of another process, which is really about creating the light. But actually, the science is now saying that dreams help with our creativity. Because they help us to make those sort of non-obvious associations. But they definitely, I find, when my life is really moving forward, really growing, then I often get that confirmation back within my dreams, and that can be incredibly affirming for us as individuals, because it will probably be, you know, our friends, people close to us will notice, you know, they might say, Tom, you look really well, like, you know, you're doing really well at the moment. But that can also happen within our dreams, because even if we just think about these things in terms of the brain, you know, my brain is a part of me, it's not a part of anyone else. It wants to work for me. So therefore, if I'm moving forward, even if on an emotional level, if I let go of something, if I'm really sort of progressing, I will get that confirmation back from a dream figure. Someone will come through to me I mean, about a week ago, my gran, bless her, he's now transitioned. She's now died a number of years ago, but she came through to me really happy. She was saying things, like, this is wonderful, Tom. Finally, you're really able to express to people why you like the things you do and why you live in this way. This is such an incredible thing. And that was, wow, that was really nice. It was really nice to have that. I mean, one of the practices in dreaming, and to sort of touch upon two things. One of the practices that I've been into for a long time, nearly 20 years now, is lucid dreaming, where you're not only aware of your dream. I mean, to the extent that you can remember your dreams in the morning, and that's important to keep a dream journal. But not only that, but you're almost, you can say, waking up within your dreams. You're conscious within the dream state, and because you're conscious in the dream state, you can navigate through the dreams in ways that are not so easy to do in an ordinary non-lucid dream. So, for example, if I was lucid in that dream where my gran came through, I would be able to say, look, hey, Gran, I know this is a dream. This is incredible. We're here together. What about we go on a journey together? What about we explore the dream terrain, or, fly through the sky and have an incredible experience? Whereas in most people's, and I would feel that. I mean, I would feel the same joy of doing that as I would do if I could fly, let's say, in physical reality. It really is, it feels the same. And so things like lucid dreaming can bring a lot of joy, a lot of, a lot of learning, a lot of creativity, because I very much see the realm of dreams and our waking life as not being a separate reality, but a reality that kind of overlaps and intermingles. So whatever we accomplish, you could say, in the dreaming realm filters through into our life. And this is not just something that I've come up with. I mean, spiritual traditions have been talking about that for thousands of years, that the connection between the realm of dreams or the other world and our waking life. There's so many examples of scientists or great artists who their inspiration was kind of, for want of a better word, sort of channeled through the realm of dreams. It really is an avenue of kind of rich creativity.
So, and super efficient for all these very busy people, because it means that you can actually be working on your vision when you're asleep, which is amazing. And I think just as a little piece of, I guess, kind of reality, I think for lots of us, is when you think about when you awaken in the morning, and even if you're not yet capable or able to do lucid dreaming as Tom describes, when you wake in the morning, that very first thought that you have, if you can just think, okay, what's my moment here for the day, what is, what am I taking from last night's sleep, and just kind of think, have I got any really great ideas just playing around just as I wake up, in that little transition. And this is worth playing with people, in that little transition between sleep and awakening. If you can just think, okay, what's a great idea? There is a great idea kind of going around in my mind right now. What is it? Where is it? You can often tap into something, you think, whoa, that was a great idea, and then write it down. Make sure you capture it, because often in that transition, you miss it, you miss the moment, or you instantly forget it. So if you do capture anything, this is a great little sort of thing to try next time you wake up. See if you can spot a really, really great idea, but log it, capture it in the moment. Would you say it's that journaling, that logging, Tom, that's critical with this?
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't. I've never met a single person who practices who's a regular lucid dreamer who doesn't remember their dreams regularly. And the best way to remember your dreams is to keep a dream journal. And obviously, you can do that by writing it down. You can record things on your smartphone. What I like to do is I like to because I often like to go for a walk in the morning, I'll record my dreams on a little mini dictaphone. And then later that day, or a few days later, I'll then transfer it into my written dream journal. I mean, one of the things that's been incredible for me as well about having a dream journal for many years is I find it so interesting to go back and look about what I was dreaming, or the lucid dreams I had from 10 years ago, 5 years, 12 years ago, because I find that sometimes the messages that came through 12 years ago are still completely relevant for me now. And I think, God, why was I not paying more attention? It was gold dust. It was magic coming through. So I think that's another good reason to keep a dream journal. So it is something like a kind of a diary of just what was going on in your psyche, in your life, and your emotional world at different periods of your life. And I think it's very just psychologically integrating as well, and as well as the practice that you were talking about when you wake up. They know in the science that one of the things that happens when we dream, and is also within dreamless sleep, is your brain, your mind is kind of working out the problems or the issues that haven't. So one good technique is to almost go to bed and feel into an issue that is not quite resolved somehow, either in your work or your emotional life, really going to bed with that question in your mind. And often what will happen is that people will feel like, even if they're not conscious what's happened in the dreams, but they'll just feel that when they wake up, suddenly they know, you know what I mean? Like they know what to do about that issue, or they know how to manifest whatever it is that they were unsure about. So that's another good technique to explore.
We've just been inundated with amazing little tips and techniques from Tom in this session. I mean, really, really valuable stuff. How do people contact you, Tom? Because you have, as you described, a lot of courses, a lot of programs. You do in-person stuff, you do online stuff. What's the best way for people to kind of explore more and find out about some of your current projects, but also some of those courses, if people want to learn more about this?
Yeah, sure. So my website is called soulremember.com, and people can go onto my website. They can contact me. All of my courses at the moment are on the platform called Udemy, spelled with a U, UDEMY.com. If you go on there and you search for Tom Llewellyn, my courses will come up. So we've got lots of courses on dreaming, sound therapy, Celtic spirituality, meditation, mindfulness, loads of different things on there. So I think there's a good, we've worked hard. I have definitely worked hard. And a lot of the courses as well, particularly the newer ones, are more collaborative courses. So people can check out my work on Udemy as well.
Brilliant. This has been a fascinating conversation. It's so good to connect, and it would be great to run maybe a little series in the coming year where we can sort of go and do a deeper dive into some of these ideas, because I think there's so much here for everybody, and I think it is just that case of just allowing yourself that creativity, allowing yourself to dream, keeping a journal, all of these tips that you shared with us, Tom. So on behalf of everybody listening, very, very grateful, and just keep dreaming, keep visioning is the trick, isn't it? Really,
absolutely.
Keep creative.
Thank you.